Did we get some breadcrumbs as to what the Dolphins front office structure could look like in the future, plus an introduction to two new candidates to know for the Miami GM vacancy?
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. And a special thank you to all of you for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network on the market. Now, today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. If you have been a consumer of Locked On Dolphins for seasons, plural now, or even going back to just this spring, you're probably familiar with some of the scouting, college scouting, free agent scouting, player presentations that we do at times on the show. We also get into them on Touchdown Miami as well over on Substack. But it's a kind of an information presentation. I get dogged plenty from folks who kind of feel like this is a little too college lecture at times. But I want to, especially with like some of these GM candidates, it's going to feel like a presentation of who they are. Now, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't have like a clicker and a laser pen and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just going to sit here and read bios to you. But think of it like a scouting report for a candidate that the Dolphins could/should explore. And, you know, Champ Kelly's going to get one of these because I think Champ Kelly is a legitimate candidate for the position. I don't think Champ Kelly was just a throw-in hire that they made who just so happened to have interim experience and is going to just so happen to carry the Dolphins through this transitional period. I think he deserves a chance to have a presentation, but that's not who we're getting into today. We're going to get into one of the names I talked about yesterday on the show, Jon-Eric Sullivan of the Green Bay Packers. He's their vice president of player personnel. And Josh Williams with the San Francisco 49ers, who holds the title of Director of Scouting and Football Operations. Getting into their backgrounds, their bios, how they've gotten to where they are at, the boxes that they check in my criteria that I'm looking for GM candidates. I can tell you on my short list of a baker's dozen candidates, they're both on the list. Okay, so these are 2 of the 13, right? Baker's dozen, not Baker Mayfield. Proverbial saying Baker dozen plus 1 in case one of them comes out messed up. I think that's how Baker's dozens work, but I didn't do any research on Baker's dozens, and I'm not going to give you a PowerPoint presentation on Baker's dozens either. I have 13 names that kind of have a clear hierarchy that I'm most interested in interviewing. Jon-Eric Sullivan, Josh Williams on the list. So we're going to present those guys, but first, we got some breadcrumbs from Albert Breer about the situation in Miami and what is and is not going to happen. And it ties back to what the trade deadline looked like. And I think there's a very clear pathway for what this potential outcome could be versus other outcomes in which there's massive changes to really just looking to hire a general manager. But if you hire just a general manager, I think that opens you up to needing to hire another person. So there's a lot here. So I want to read this passage from Albert Breer. It had a mailbag asking about Mike McDaniel and his role as the head coach of the team and the future of the organization, this, that, the other. So here's the passage from Albert Breer. Dolphins are working on replacing Greer, where the GM search leads owner Stephen Ross will obviously impact Mike McDaniel's future. Cap chief Brandon Shore could factor into all of this too, in that more teams like the Lions and Rams have empowered people in his role and gone to sort of a 3-headed model to lead football operations. If Shore and McDaniel are on the same page and the team acquits itself well down the stretch, might it make the most sense to drop a general manager into that setup to lead scouting, be it the current interim, Champ Kelly, or someone else? Or would Ross simply favor someone through the process of interviewing GM candidates who would keep Mike McDaniel? There's a lot of layers to this one. A lot of layers is code for complicated. And I know there's a lot of Dolphins fans who have already resided to the idea that they're just going to keep Cham Kelly and take the interim tag off of him, and he's going to be the GM, and it's going to be Brandon Shore, Mike McDaniel, and Cham Kelly, a.k.a. the triumvirate that ran the Dolphins trade deadline efforts, in collaborating to decide on what the best decisions were for the future of the Dolphins organization. And that very well may happen. But if that's the case, I'm old enough to remember when Stephen Ross first bought the Dolphins, and you had Joe Philbin or Tony Sperano and Jeff Ireland and Don Aponte, and the great big chaos is a ladder, Game of Thrones style approach. And boy, oh boy, do I get leery about the idea of Stephen Ross flying down and sitting in the box on game days and not being in the building every single day, to have three individuals, Mike McDaniel, Brandon Shore, and an executive, that all directly report to him. Because then if the team doesn't perform at the level that you want, who's telling what to Stephen Ross? Who's telling what to each other about the third person not in the room? This is the scar tissue that I carry as a Dolphins fan that lived through the Jeff Ireland era of the team, where him and Tony Sperano are spitting poison at each other, and Don Aponte chooses sides, and then Don Aponte tries to get Jeff Ireland to bring him around or brings Joe Philbin around to try to evict Jeff Ireland out of the front office. It was a very messy time. And I think if you do it right, this structure can work because it allows everybody to focus on their lane, right? But if this structure is going to work, I think there's an additional hire that you have to make. And I think that has to be I'm not going to say the Bill Parcells football czar, which was the title that he was bestowed when he was here in Miami for his brief stint. But whether it's vice president of football operations or whatever else, if you have three equal powers steering the football operation, whether it's Mike McDaniel, Brandon Shore, and GM of choice, Cham Kelly, or otherwise, or if it's three brand new people, if that's your power structure for your front office, I think you need somebody who's in the building every day with a football background to tie it all together. Anything less than that, you are setting yourself up, in my opinion, for disaster. Because when adversity hits, everybody talks. Everybody answers to the owner, so the owner's going to call each one of them up. Call them up to the principal's office. Hey, what's going on? Why is the team not performing? The coach is going to say, well, I'm not getting the players that I need. And the GM's can say, well, I don't have the leeway that I have to add more players because our cap management structured wrong. And then the cap guys can say, well, we made these commitments to these guys because the coach said we wanted them, and now he's not getting anything out of them. Right? It's chaos is a ladder, very messy. So I would like if there's going to be a three-pronged football operation, kind of three pillars of the organization, of the football operation, regardless of who they are, I think you need somebody at the top who's there every day, who sees it, who understands how all this stuff works to tie it all together. And that opens you up for a senior executive position. All of this, of course, is contingent on the Dolphins probably winning for the final 6 games. Probably. Because if you move on from Mike McDaniel, it becomes very simple. Is the general manager could come in and you could structure your front office however you want. And it is risky business to say, hey, GM candidate, we want to bring you into the fold. But as a head coach, there's already a cap guy. You're going to fit this model and run the scouting and the personnel acquisition element of it. And oh, by the way, there's going to be somebody over top of you too. That's where you start getting a little leery about how attractive these executives, they get one shot more often than not. Some of them get 2, mainly the really successful ones. But if you get one shot You say, I'm going to come in here and you want me to have a VP of football ops over my head, and you want me to answer to the cap guy for cap stuff, and you want me to answer the head coach for X, Y, and Z, and potentially 53-man roster control? I don't know. Maybe I'll just take that other job. Or maybe I'll just wait another year. Or maybe I'll wait till the bottom falls out on this, and then you can call me back. I don't mean to say that to be pessimistic, because everything can work with the right people in place. But I've seen these kinds of open-ended power structures in Miami under Stephen Ross not bear the fruit that you want. And now you're focused on fighting internally for your leverage to keep your job instead of collectively fighting to beat the opponent on any given Sunday. Great movie. So I thought that was interesting from Albert Breer. I think this is very contingent on winning a lot down the stretch for Miami. I think at least 4 wins. If you get at least 4 or more, I would say we put this into the likely or possible realm. You run the table. Yeah, I think they'll roll with it. They underachieve. They lose some games that they shouldn't. I think it makes it very easy to then say, hey, we want the best candidate for the GM spot, and anything that comes along with that as far as other changes, you tell us, right? You're the big dog on campus now. But all this is on the table, as evidenced by Albert Breer. And there was another report just, what was it, yesterday? It came from Jeremy Fowler. He said, I do get the sense Mike McDaniel can salvage his job, but I wouldn't call it likely. In my mind, there's a plausible scenario where he sticks in Miami. Cleaning house feels entirely possible. McDaniel is at least making things interesting, right? So I think there's a lot riding on the next 7 weeks if you're a fan of the Miami Dolphins for the future of this organization and what power structures they go with and what candidates they pursue. And if you win, I'm good with winning. I'm cool with winning. I don't care about being right. I don't care about being wrong. I want to win. I don't want sustainability winning. And I think there are certain things I have belief on what that needs for that to happen. And that would include some more firm checks and balances with your front office structure, but also getting the right people in-house has a lot to do with that as well, which is what we're going to explore next. A couple of candidates to potentially be the right person to bring into the house. We'll explore that next. Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every single day, but on Prize Picks, being right gets you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether it's the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on all of the action. If you have not tried it, Prize Picks is the simplest way to play. You pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It can take less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere that Prize Picks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. There's new stacks feature is a game changer. You could pick a single player on more for Steph Curry points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it is good to be right. Jon-Eric Sullivan, mentioned his name off the pop yesterday. He is the son of Jerry Sullivan, who's a longtime NFL and college coach with more than 40 years of experience. He, from a work experience lifer, does not check one of the boxes that I really like and am attracted to in candidates, which is being a part of multiple organizations. He is a lifer in Green Bay. He started as a training camp intern in 2003. But some of his higher education and background and his father's experience as a coach and the vacancy the place that put him to be connected to football when he was young, I think is valuable. He's a former player in college, played at South Carolina as a wide receiver. Jon-Eric Sullivan, 22nd season in Green Bay, 4th as the vice president of player personnel. So he's one of the right-hand men to Brian Gutekunst, the general manager there in Green Bay. Gutekunst obviously took over from Ted Thompson, who took over from Ron Wolf. You talk about like the gold standard pipeline of scouting and player personnel. Green Bay is it, right? They are the gold standard, and all off the Ron Wolf tree, and how all those guys got bred in how to evaluate talent and build teams and so on and so forth. So he got his bachelor's degree in social science and then worked in sales for several seasons before deciding to go back and work as a training camp intern in Green Bay. The following year, he gets a call to come back, and he works at the football operations department, not in scouting, but just in the front office department from kind of an admin standpoint. Before he then levels up, he becomes the scout for the Central Plains region for Green Bay. Then he's the Southeast regional scout. 2016 and 17, he's promoted to the director of college scouting. He's the co-director of player personnel from 2018 to 2021. And then in 2022 becomes the vice president of player personnel. In 2025, he interviewed for multiple general manager vacancies, including the Tennessee Titans, Las Vegas Raiders, and the New York Jets. Yuck. Glad he didn't take that job. So that's Jon-Eric Sullivan's background. What really impresses me about Jon-Eric Sullivan is you can listen to an interview that he did with the Packers in-house media. The interview was one of the things that I was most impressed about with Jon-Eric Sullivan. Now, he has a player evaluation background because he started out as a regional scout in Green Bay, but he also has administrative background because he worked in the front office in non-scouting capacities at first. He has coaching exposures from his dad. He was part of a successful quarterback draft. He's got head coaching connections with being in Green Bay and Mike McCarthy and this current staff that exists in Green Bay. He's been connected and worked at the same place at the same time as Giro Vero, who's a popular defensive coordinator now in Carolina, and Jeff Hafley, who's going to be a head coaching candidate down the road, but is the defensive coordinator now in Boston College, who was the head coach at Boston College before coming to Green Bay to be the defensive coordinator. So that entire Mike McCarthy era of Green Bay football, he was here for all of it. A couple of young guys as defensive coordinators that he has exposures to. The draft record in Green Bay speaks for itself. I mean, the way that they have gone about drafting, not just what players did they pick, but what's their draft philosophy in Green Bay. And that's where you listen to him talk in some of the interviews that he's done with the Packer in-house media. And he talks about it's a young man's game, right? And he talked about, and I was very impressed listening to him talk about the concept of an older team and an older team influencing how you practice. And then the impact of how you practice transitioning into how you play in games. And I think about the 2023 and 2023 and 2024 Miami Dolphins with guys on vet rests and guys can't practice and guys are DMP limited. Guys are DMP, and then still playing the game on Sunday, did not participate. It was pretty eye-opening to me. And Green Bay's been one of the youngest rosters in football for the last 3 years. And they make splashes, right? Like they swung for the fence on Micah Parsons in the same way that they swung for the fences when they went out and they got Charles Woodson, in the same way that they swung for the fences when they went out and got Reggie White. But they don't, their school of thought and philosophy is the draft is the lifeblood of an organization, and it is a young man's game. You have to make strategic decisions on who you pay. You have to make strategic decisions on the health, the long-term and short-term health of the roster, but you need to go about allocating a certain kind of talent so that you know what you have, you know what you don't, you know what's at your disposal, you know who you have that's ready to step up and sets a certain floor for your position, instead of going into an offseason flying totally blind and say, hey, we need to go out and we need to draft 2 defensive tackles and a guard to start for us in year 1. And that's a conscious decision that we're going to make. Because what happens if the guard's not ready? What happens if the defensive tackle ideally is not playing 60% of the snaps from week one? You don't got anybody else to play. So I was very impressed listening to the perspective of young players and the influence of young players, not just in the games and the health and the durability, but its influence on your impact to play the game and its influence on how you can practice as a football team. Some good insight there. I want to interview Jon-Eric Sullivan. In total, I will say this, stand alone at the top of the list. There's another collective group within the hierarchy of the 31 names on the GM list that I discussed yesterday when we kind of introduced this. Almost half of that list is what I would classify as my short list with my Baker's Dozen 13 list of names. And not all of these are necessarily guys that are going to say yes to an interview, because Will McClay has the same title in Dallas as Jon-Eric Sullivan does in Green Bay. But there's an actual general manager in Green Bay's Brian Gutekunst, and there's not in Dallas, where Will McClay kind of is the GM, but it's Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones, the owner and the owner's son, who kind of have the other influence on the football operation. Jon-Eric Sullivan, very impressive resume. Love the diversity of coaching exposures, administrative background, especially from a grassroots perspective and early in his career, to understand the lower levels of front office management. Went up through scouting, has been groomed by names like Ted Thompson, who's legendary as part of a gold standard organization for organizational stability and a unit that puts their money where their mouth is for talking about building sustainable winners and how they go about doing so via the draft. And the discipline, generally speaking, that organization has used during his 22 years there, with free agency and strategy in that regard as well. I like it. I like it a lot. So pick up the phone. Let's get the interview scheduled ASAP. Now, they obviously can't do those interviews right now. We're going to get into a window where they can in about a month and a half-ish. Our second introduction today comes from Josh Williams of San Francisco. We're going to talk about him next here on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. There's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game, or if you want to ride the hot hand throughout, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to potential fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets for a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is the one that is making that late-game push. And with no Miami Dolphins football, tragically, this weekend for us to get up for, FanDuel has you covered to keep your weekend in sport plenty exciting. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com, sign up, and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Josh Williams, native of Santa Rosa, California, graduated from St. Ignatius College Prep in San Francisco, earned his bachelor's degree in psychology from Columbia in 2010, was a 4-year wide receiver for Columbia for their college program in the Ivy League. He worked as an investments products business analyst at TD Ameritrade in the financial district for several years. A very impressive pre-life in football career history there. Now, he joined the 49ers in 2011 as an assistant in the scouting department. He was promoted to a pro personnel scout 2 seasons later and served in that role for 3 years. He's been with the 49ers in total for 14 seasons. This was his first year in 2025, serving as the director of scouting and football operations. Per the 49ers bio on the 49ers.com bio page for Josh Williams, Williams directs pro and college scouting efforts, supports player development, and assists in contract negotiations. So what I like about Josh Williams is obviously there's a Ivy League background here. There's a very intelligent individual, and it becomes very apparent when you listen to him talk. Now, he was also a part of the league's front office and general manager accelerator program, and represented the 49ers in that regard. And that was in 2024. So that was almost a little more than a year ago was when he took part in that accelerator program. But you got a degree in psychology. You got a bachelor's, or you got a graduate degree from an Ivy League school at Columbia and played football there. You've kind of come up through, and you have your hands right now already in pro and college scouting, player development, which is something that Ray Agnew with the Lions, previously with the Rams, as another name on this list, has experience with player development, and then assists in contract negotiations. So really, Williams has experience in what your potential 3 columns of identity for your organization are going to be. If you really stop and think about it, there's the Brandon Shore led lane is contract negotiations. Player development stems from coaching, but that can be personal development and off the field development. And then the coordination of all of your seeking out of new talents. I wish there was a little bit bigger sample size of just what the performance of the organization's talent acquisition efforts look like with him in this elevated role. I think that would be the one wish that I would have for his spot. But you look at the criteria that I have collected on things that I value, and he's got a player evaluation background with his scouting roots. He obviously, with his business analyst background and his higher education and degree in psychology, there's an administration and ability to kind of properly organize information and make decisions with it. There's no coaching experience here like there are for some others. They were technically a part of a successful quarterback draft with the acquisition of Brock Purdy, but that's doing a little bit of heavy lifting, and he wasn't in a super high role like he is now. He's not been a part of multiple successful organizations, but he has been a part of San Francisco, and the maturation of San Francisco stemming from what the Harbaugh years, right? So that's where it gets really impressive to look at the lexicon of connections that Josh Williams has in his time in San Francisco with Jim Harbaugh, Ejiro Evero, Vic Fangio was there. Not to say you would hire Vic Fangio, but that exposure exists. Kyle Shanahan, Robert Saleh, Jeff Hafley, Mike McDaniel. Like there's a lot of connections that are relevant for both who the Dolphins are right now and people within the same tree of coaching that the Dolphins have committed to if they wanted to go in a different direction down the road, with some parallels. It's also very risky business at times to kind of retrofit criteria to hire somebody based off of what you had before. And that applies for the general manager job just as it applies for anything else. One thing neither one of these two guys have is the one thing that I said was my cherry on top for these candidates, which was a familiarity with South Florida. Now, if you could get either one of these two into a position that falls in line with your Albert Breer proposed pathway, and I'm not saying I would take this pathway because I am first and foremost very much of the belief that organizational alignment is the number one thing that you have to have, and the easiest way to do that is to have everybody come in and hired at the same time and be on the same wavelength and the same timetable at the same time. That's my belief. As compared to coach has been here since 2022, GM's been here since 2016. what's going on. Assistant GM's been here since 2019, yada, yada. Mike Tannenbaum's been here. Okay, Mike, we're going to promote you out. And okay, Chris, you're going to be the GM. Okay, now we're going to hire Brian Flores. Okay, it didn't work there. Well, you get to pick another coach because you didn't get the coach the first time. Okay, now we got Mike McDaniel. Well, now I like Mike McDaniel. And now Chris Greer's not going to work out with you, so you're going to go. So now we're going to bring a GM and fit with Mike McDaniel. Right? Like, everybody's leverage points and patience points are different. And I get the concern of not wanting to throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. But the opportunity cost might be worth it to ensure that everybody's on the same page at the same time. That's my personal belief, but I want to be open to all of the potential avenues, including the one that many of you have resided to, which is they're going to keep Mike and maybe they strip the interim title off of Champ Kelly, right? But if you get one of either Jon-Eric Sullivan and Josh Williams and you go through interviews and you interview them both and they end up being the guy that you pick and he says yes to the job, and you go with that three-pronged approach, that's where I think your higher level executive becomes very important, because maybe that is the one that has the familiarity with South Florida that you need to kind of tie everything together. Those are two candidates on the Baker's dozen. We'll get into a few more tomorrow here on the show. Make sure you stick with us. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Enjoy the Thursday night football game tonight. I selfishly have to say go Texans, playing the Bills. And we will see you on Friday. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking the show. We'll talk to you all again soon. Go Fins.